Good morning and welcome to Connect MKE, formerly Our Issues Milwaukee, where we take a look at the people making a difference and the issues that affect where we live, work, and play. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. During the next half hour, we'll focus on the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, Wisconsin's largest community foundation. It has inspired philanthropy by connecting generous people to community needs that align with their interests. They work in partnership with those who are committed to ensuring Greater Milwaukee is a vibrant, economically thriving region that comprises welcoming and inclusive communities, providing opportunity, prosperity, and a high quality of life for all. My first guest is Kathryn Dunn. She serves as Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer and Management of the Foundation's grant making, scholarships, leadership initiatives, and evaluation of grant outcomes and impact. How are you, Kathryn?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm good. Good to be with you. I appreciate being here.
Greater Milwaukee Foundation was among the first community foundations established in the world. That's pretty major. So if you would, tell us more about the foundation and how you work to make a difference in the Greater Milwaukee area.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we were founded in 1915, and we are one of the oldest community foundations, as you said. And we were founded really with the idea in mind of bringing together generous donors to address community needs. And our mission has changed and evolved over the years, but that really still is a core tenet of our purpose and why we exist. However, we also have really grown to expand our interpretation of serving the broader community, and we do a lot of convening of different groups within the community, including our donors, bringing them together around critical issues and together try to build solutions, which does include some grant making and funding, but also really includes building that table out where people with different views can come together, develop a shared understanding of what issues we're facing, and then develop shared solutions. And so we still serve our donors and help them with their philanthropic goals. And we also play a very different role now in the community with convening community residents, donors, government officials, again, and really just trying to create that shared understanding of what those issues are in the community, and then creating shared work together on how we're going to address those.
Yeah, very important work, needless to say. And you know, we've covered the subject of systemic racism and how it manifests as discrimination in areas such as criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, education, and political representation. And what has always stood out to me about the Greater Milwaukee Foundation is your mission to overcome racial divide and to build a better Milwaukee for everyone. If you would talk about some of the initiatives that you have in place to really make that mission a reality.
Sure. That, the Milwaukee for All vision really stems from both our strategic plan from 2020, but also from a commitment that our board made in 2016. They made a generational commitment to use all of the tools in our philanthropic toolbox to address racism and racial equity in the Greater Milwaukee area. And that has really translated into us working very differently externally as well as internally. So our Milwaukee for All vision really requires us to reimagine how we think about philanthropy and what role philanthropy plays, to recenter community. So really walking alongside community residents and helping shape what our agenda is, and really valuing that lived voice experience and making sure they're part of our decision-making process. And then remaking systems, because as you said, there's a lot of systems that have been established that, whether intentional or the unintended consequence, the end result is that there's extreme disparities in access, experience, and outcomes for particularly people of color in the Milwaukee area. And so our focus really has been on how do we as a community foundation step in and play a role with those tools that we have. So philanthropists and our convening power, the ability to commission research, but more importantly, is really the ability to be that connector with the community residents. Those are the people we really serve, we're here to serve, and the donors. Again, another constituent that we're here to serve. How do we bring them together and really think about the systems that are in place, really think about what role we can play in addressing and dismantling some of these systems and the structures that are in place.
Yeah, and something that the foundation did way before the pandemic, before there was the marches on Black Lives Matter and things of that nature, you really were bringing people together from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds, to talk about that very difficult and sometimes uncomfortable subject of race. But it's been established that that's what's going to happen in order for us to move forward and not be divided as people. So that was the On the Table MKE, and I know that you had outcomes from doing that, and you also have learnings and outcomes from this Milwaukee for All initiative. So if you would talk a little bit about what you found out from all of these things that are in place.
Well, you're right. Milwaukee for All, the last year we had a series of on the table like conversations, all virtual, of course, because of the pandemic. What was really different about Milwaukee for All, and I'll say that we learned a lot from the different people who participated in on the table conversations, and we took that learning and brought it into the Milwaukee for All. And one of the things that we did was we curated the conversations in a way that grouped them around those themes that I shared. So some of the strategic priorities in our strategic plan, like reimagining philanthropy. So we had Darren Walker from the Ford Foundation be part of a conversation with us around how do we think differently about the resources and the access and the influence that philanthropy has, and use that to really address racism in our country. And it was a very provocative, very inspiring conversation. And then we had people from all walks of Milwaukee participating in smaller group chats after his speech. We use that same format to address issues like early childhood education and how do we elevate the significance of early childhood education in sort of our thinking about the role that it plays in the economy, the role that it plays in helping shape young children's minds, the role that it plays in helping dismantle some of the structural issues that are facing children, particularly of children of color in Milwaukee in terms of educational outcomes. So again, same format with having two national speakers, national experts participate in a conversation that included a variety of people from Milwaukee, residents, teachers, people from colleges and universities, politicians, to really lean into this discussion about what can we do to elevate the importance of early childhood education, the children that it's serving, and the caregivers or the educators. It's the educators who are serving our youngest citizens. And then, each of these series, the third one I should mention was with Dr. Andre Perry, and based on a book that he wrote, Know Your Price, and really about the undervaluing of property in predominantly African American and Latino communities across the country, and what lost value that creates for us as a society as a whole, but certainly economically for African American communities, Latino communities. It was, again, just a great conversation, along with some calls to action at the end of each of these different conversations with what we can do, whether it was join a group who's working to address some of the issues that were raised, or just sign up to learn more. I mean, we offered various points of entry for people who were participating, but really trying to advance some of the strategic priorities around thinking about race, structural racism, what role philanthropy plays in that, and then what role more broadly do residents, community members play in understanding the issue and addressing the issue.
All good stuff. I thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's very clear with everything that you've shared with us up to this point that you strongly believe that no individual, institution, or neighborhood can take on the challenges that we face alone. So partnerships obviously are very important, and you've made that clear. But I want to talk about early childhood, something that you touched upon. 1 in 3 Milwaukee children live in a community with equitable access to early childhood education, with Black and Latinx children disproportionately affected. How do you plan to improve early childhood education and ensure that every child in Milwaukee is actually prepared to enter school?
That's a big question because there's a lot of facets to that. So early childhood education is critically important to making sure that Milwaukee as a community advances, and particularly that our youngest children have the tools they need when they enter school to be successful. Mm-hmm. And as you stated, you've quoted some research that the foundation engaged in a few years ago. And part of that research was certainly gathering the data and the information, but also building out this table of people who come from the sector. So whether it was people who ran early childhood education centers, people who were part of the early childhood education program at MATC or UWM, state officials, other people within the sector, to really review the data, help analyze what it was telling us, and then help craft a shared strategy and priorities around how we can increase access to affordable, high-quality care and address the systemic barriers that exist within the system that, range from not the business model and the public support that goes into the system, not adequately recognizing the profession as a profession, mm-hmm. and not paying the people who are actually teaching our youngest children at the same level that the credentials that are required to be in that role would suggest that they're being paid. So we have our colleagues in Milwaukee Succeeds are part of the Early Childhood Education Coalition. It's a broad, diverse group of people from the sector who are advancing recommendations on how to increase pay and equity in pay in the field. Mm-hmm. They've been influencing and informing the utilization of the Recovery Act dollars that are coming into the state. And so they're helping direct them at specific strategies within the early childhood education field, both in Milwaukee as well as statewide. And then we've been working on a number of projects that are designed to increase the pipeline of teachers, including men of color, so that young children of color see men of color in front of them in early childhood education settings. And we're working on increasing just the general supply of quality. So we're doing that through building an early childhood education center within our new Thrive on King, which you're going to hear about in a little bit. And then also supporting providers with grants to help them enhance their physical facility space that will translate into increased or enhanced quality experience for the young children in their care. And then other strategies that are addressed at the providers who are in the field right now and supporting them with mental health resources. Things that we know through the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic are really impacting the field. So we have a couple of key strategies that we're advancing, both the Greater Milwaukee Foundation and partnership then with the Early Childhood Education Coalition, and many other actors who are in this space and interested in early childhood.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And another priority, of course, is housing. So you are working towards increasing home ownership and reducing eviction rates through your partnerships as well. But as we wrap up, Kathryn, just wanted you to give us an idea of how the Greater Milwaukee Foundation has had to pivot and make adjustments like so many other organizations across the board. What have you had to do in order to be able to stay on your mission and continue to make a difference in the community where we live?
The pandemic has certainly had an impact on how we're able to engage with community residents, for example, which has been one of our key commitments. And however, we have a really strong community engagement team that has successfully created opportunities using Zoom and using virtual office hours to make sure that we're staying very connected to the residents and to the people in the neighborhoods that we're working in. So building that capacity with again, just ourselves and how we continue to fulfill that commitment of engagement. Across our other partnerships, it's the same thing. We've really had to be very intentional about being more inclusive and accommodating people who we want and value their input and their direction on our work. However, they have day jobs, and so we need to think about we do things on evenings and weekends to bring other voices in who otherwise might not be engaging with us. So, we've been adapting and just trying to be creative about how we continue that commitment to engagement and making sure for sure that we are engaging residents in the work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today and just making everyone aware of the outstanding work that's been done at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you again for the invitation.
Kathryn Dunn is the Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. For more information on anything we've discussed, you can visit greatermilwaukeefoundation.org. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return to Connect MKE, we'll continue our focus on the Greater Milwaukee Foundation and discuss economic empowerment and the importance of strengthening Milwaukee neighborhoods right after this.